to Real Chicks Rock Presents Real Discussions. I am your host, Michelle Dawes-Bird, and as always, I'm super excited to be here. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood here in Atlanta, Georgia. Sunny skies. My people up in the Northeast, they're getting all this rain. It just won't stop raining. And I'm like, I'm down here with the sunroof open. It's just I'm just loving the days. It's just beautiful, and we just thank God for everything. Today, I'm super excited. We had a nice little green room conversation, but I want to welcome all of my new guests that are joining us today. Let me tell you what Real Chicks Rock is all about. It's all about creatively collaborating and to connect and to raise awareness regarding issues that impact us as women. And we do it by way of community service, public speaking, mentoring, workshops, and the arts. And this, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, we've been doing this for 6 years. This is our 7th season. Yeah. Wow. So we're going into year 7 of having these informative conversations. I'm always thankful and honored when people that want to make change in the community and in the political space want to take time to come on this particular platform and just share. They want to be able to be transparent, give you some insight about what's important to them, why they're running, and the things that we have in front of us, and why it's important for us to vote. And today is no different. I have, for the second time, I have Valencia Stovall. Hi, Valencia.
Hello.
How
Thank you, Michelle. I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me back to Real Chicks Rock again.
Oh, you're welcome. Good to see you. You're looking well. You're doing well.
Thank you. Same
I'm
to you.
seeing the signs everywhere, and we're gonna get into that. But I just want to just honor the fact that you're born and raised here in Atlanta.
Yes.
Yeah. How's it been? Just being here all this time. Just seeing Atlanta change.
Yeah. You know, being born and raised on southeast side of Atlanta. Both parents were born and raised here.
Right.
My daddy was very active in the community, and if you ever have ridden across the 7585 bridge at University Avenue, there's a sign that says Valencia Stovall Bridge.
I've seen that.
Yeah, so that's my dad's bridge.
Amen.
It wasn't named after my dad, but he claimed it as his bridge.
It is his. Dad, you got it. That's yours. That's it. So you got the bug and got, wanting to see change from your dad, from your family, which is awesome. So that leads me to my next question. How and why did you get in politics? Was it really your dad's inspiration or something else?
No, it was all my dad. So growing up, my two sisters and I always followed my dad around. He started being involved with PTA from elementary to high school. And then in the community, he was chair of what's called the Neighborhood Planning Unit. For those who live in Atlanta, know that that's the community group that kind of makes decisions of growth of what's going to happen in the community. And so when he served as chair, they were looking for a secretary. Now, I was just attending. I was about 18 years old. So I was just attending the meetings. And they said, Stovall, we can let your daughter be the secretary. And I was like, I don't think I want to be. They said, oh, yeah, it's a good idea. So that thing, I know they voted me in as secretary. And so that's my first time being secretary. And so I'm recording minutes. Now, I'm writing out everything they're saying. So when I get back to the next meeting, I have the minutes typed up. I'm passing them out. They read and said, one lady said, come here, baby. We're not going to approve these minutes. She said, you have too much information in here. She said, you're supposed to do a summary. You don't write down everything we said, because, they were talking about each other and talk about things. And so I had to go back and revise those minutes for the next meeting. But that was my first time really, I always went to the meetings, but then being involved in it and seeing the many changes that they made as a community group. They had a lot of disagreements, but then when it came down to really strong community events and things that they want to see, they were able to unify on those. And so my dad also helped many people that ran for office, like the late Mayor Maynard Jackson. And so he served as his community liaison for 2 years, for the 2 terms of his office. And so being able to watch all these people, and then when I became elected in 2012 and went to the state capitol, some of the same people I had been helping campaigning with my dad were people I actually was serving with in the legislature. So watching him and being involved and always being active and vocal, has definitely inspired me, and as well as my 2 sisters as well.
Wow, That's an awesome legacy. Awesome legacy. So I want to talk about that. You being elected to the Georgia House of Representatives in 2012, you were working for 8 years. You raised $45 million, 45 million grant for local government. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. It was hard work.
Yeah.
The issue was that in Clayton County, we had, with the Federal Aviation Administration, made a ruling that if you had an airport located in your jurisdiction, that you could not collect sales tax get from the gas or fuel tax unless you had total operation of the airport.
Wow.
And it's a very unique situation in Clayton County and the city of Atlanta. So city of Atlanta owns and operates the airport, but the airport physically sits 80% on Clayton County grounds. And so that's where the dilemma happened. And so each year, that was going to cost the county, the city, and the school system about $18 million a year. And so the $45 million ended up being a grant. Part was from our state budget that was given, that the legislators voted on, and I really appreciate the help of Governor Deal, who championed that for us. And then another portion came from Delta Foundation, Delta Airlines Foundation, that went to the school district. And so that kind of gave a stopgap, but it didn't still solve the issue. And so they're still facing it. They've introduced several bills since I've left, several pieces of legislation trying to rectify it, but they haven't come to a resolve. So so that's a federal issue. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to when I get to Washington, D.C. Yes.
Has the education been impacted in Clayton County because of this, Valencia?
Yes, it has, and a lot of people probably have not seen it yet, because sometimes it takes years, especially when you're collecting what they call the SPLOS. And for the education, it's the E-SPLOS for that. So it takes a couple of years before you actually see the effects of it. And so that actually stopped in December 2019. So I think coming up the next couple of years, you're going to start seeing it. And the only thing with the school system, they can't raise the millage rate any higher than the 20 mills, and that's a cap for the state of Georgia. So they have to look at other ways to being able to offset that money. And then now the cities and the counties are going to be affected as well, because they were used to receiving that money in every year, that total of 18 million for all three entities. And so the 45, like I said, was a grant. They didn't have to pay it back, which was good, but there still was not the end-all resolution for it.
Right, because there was a time where Clayton County had lost their accreditation. So I know it's important to make sure. I mean, it's back now, but it's important because that's a viable place to live in. The access to the airport, just to the city, just to move about. So it's a good location. And so people that have children are looking, and affordable homes, right? So it would be great that the educational system married the opportunities that are in Clayton County. So good job on that.
Thank you.
I want to talk to you about your passion for Georgia farmers. Tell us a little bit about that and the work you've done to help them.
Yeah, so it's very unusual, even because of Congressional District 5, what I'm running for. It's still, I call it the metro heartbeat of Atlanta, because of how diverse it is. And the farmers market, the Georgia Farmers Market, which we know it was actually renamed through some work that I did as being the chair of the revitalization of the farmers market. It was a study committee, and one of the things that came out of the committee was the renaming of it. So it is renamed. And the reason that we did a focus, because you kind of think of farming down in the rural areas. You don't think of it in the urban areas, and so in the metro areas. And so because that farmers market is the largest distribution of goods from farmers in the Southeast region, so not just in Georgia, but the whole Southeast region. So we wanted to make sure that we keep it revitalized, so that it could continue to be one, which agriculture is the largest moneymaker for us here in the state of Georgia. And so we wanted to make sure, with it being in an urban area, that it was going to be beneficial to that Forest Park and that whole Clayton County and Southeast Atlanta area.
I did not know that agriculture was our bread and butter as a whole. Awesome. And you're right, Valencia. We don't think about it in the metro or urban spaces. It's rural. We think it's far out or farther south or whatever, and then we definitely don't think about black farmers, because they're impacted as well. You know, and they get very little to operate with what they got. But we need it because, and I am, quite frankly, I'm starting to see more independent trucks and people just selling their produce and products.
Right.
More pop-ups, if you will, versus them going through the stores. Because it's hard to really, I guess, understand. They say local, but you know, we don't know if everybody's getting an opportunity to get their product to the table. But I do see that people are, we as a whole are taking a vested interest in what we eat. So even there's amateur farmers, right? People that
the community gardens, a lot of those are popping up.
Exactly, just to help feed and educate the neighborhood on the importance of growing our own, knowing that it's healthy, and just giving people a trade or a hobby and things like that. And it provides to those that are in lack. Right, so those that are not able to afford groceries, you have those community gardens where they got the stuff going on. So that's some good work there. I want to talk to you about, Valencia, the school redesign, and what did that really consist of?
So for about 6 years in the Georgia legislature, I served on the education committee. And on the education committee, I also served on the education appropriations committee. So that committee was responsible for whatever the funding is that was in our budget that went towards education, and that was from 0 all the way to 12th grade. And so there was another committee that handled higher ed, and it was called the higher ed committee, but I was on the one from 0 all the way to 12th grade. Yes. And so, and I also served, I was one of a few Democrats that had a leadership position that served as the vice chair of the subcommittee on academic support. And so because I was able to kind of see on the whole totality of education across the state of Georgia, and not just in the area where I represented at that time, which was Clayton County, I saw that there were different things that were happening all over the state. But at the end of the day, everyone wanted the best education for our children. And so because there were differences everywhere, the redesign part of education was seeing what worked in different areas. And of course in rural, they have a different dynamics than in metro. But if we have some top performing schools in metro, why we don't have all top performing schools in metro? You know, and if there were some in rural Georgia that were top performing, why we didn't have all the schools high performing in rural Georgia? And so that's what it kind of was about, the redesigning. And for 3 years I actually hosted the Educate Georgia Summit. And so we brought in over 1,000 people that came down to the state capitol during session to talk to the policymakers, and we had held committee meetings, committee workshops. We invited them to the different committee meetings. We had the governor, who was a guest speaker all 3 years. We had the speaker to come. We had the state superintendent that came. And so that in that show, and even we had both House and Senate committee chairmen that actually came, and all those were Republicans. So the issue with education is not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's a people's issue. Because if the children don't have a foundation, and that kind of comes back to the reimagining, then we all end up suffering, because they're going to age out of our system at 18 or older, and then if they don't have the foundation, we're going to pay for it in other ways.
You know that's right.
Yes.
I know that's right. Do you think also that in doing your work with redesign, was the teachers also an issue? Was there a gap there as well? Yeah,
so with the redesign, we had everyone to come to the table, even like at the Educate Georgia Summit. So we had students, we wanted to hear their voices. We had parents, we had educators, we had those in the classroom, the administrators. We even had people from the higher ed community, because they have schools of education that they're now preparing our future teachers to come into the classroom. And we had business owners that were there, because they're going to eventually going to have a workforce that they're looking for. And we had regular community people that are just interested. They might not have any kids in the system, but they were interested. And so because you would listen to all those voices, you're now able to have a collective voice on and a better direction of what we want the future of education to be in the state of Georgia.
We definitely have to change the model. We can talk about it a little bit more. But we definitely have to be more competitive. The things that we grew up on, Valencia, are not the things that our kids are interested in today. And we need them to be more competitive and more edgy. If nothing else, there always need to be, in my opinion, a technology work stream at every high school, and definitely a business or entrepreneurial track, because everybody's not going to go to college. They don't want to go, and these kids are very smart today, very insightful. They take the risks. They know exactly what they're doing, but they may not have all of the elements to successfully run a business. And so I think I would love to see that, whether you are in Savannah, like Macon or Kennesaw or Ackworth down to Rex, Georgia, right? Like every high school should have that. So this way, parents don't have to fill out any kind of hardship transfer because sneak their
to
kids
get their
in.
kids. And I had even had some legislation I introduced about 3 years. It didn't pass, but it was to eliminate the zip code limitations when you want your child to go to a better school. And so, but everybody didn't agree with it, and I couldn't get it out of committee. I had a hearing, but couldn't get it out of committee.
It's not fair.
Yeah, it's not, because you're in a community that, for whatever reason, you end up in that community.
Right.
And if it was your choice, you would pack up and move to the better community.
Right.
But economically, you can't. And so, but that means that your child is a can't as well, because they can't go to a better school.
Exactly.
And then until we have what's called accountability within our traditional schools, then we're going to still see what's going on with our schools and students not performing at the level they could be at, and there's no reason for them not to be able to perform at that level. And so so even like you said, with that, you have parents that are now stuck with a very heavy choice because they have to invest in their children's future. And you're trying to decide, okay, if I go to this school over here outside the district, I'm gonna have to get up an hour or extra hour and a half earlier, and then I'm gonna be stuck in traffic coming back, and then I'm having to leave to go to work after I drop the child off. And so there's a lot of hours spent in your car that you could be spent with your family.
Or
and so
at work.
Or at work. So those type of things are huge challenges, for our children, and having those opportunities available in a local school that they can attend is very essential.
It's very essential because, Valencia, we are able to purchase homes now in different areas, and again, it's about economics, right?
Yes,
and
it's
what
all
we
about
can
it.
afford. And so it's wonderful that now we can be homeowners, but our children are not getting the education they rightly deserve. As homeowners, we should get the same thing, and that is the thing I do not like. That is so lopsided, and then everybody's trying to run to one side of town or one area, and they can't. And because of that, the houses are more expensive. So now you may have to give up living in a home. People are renting apartments. In order for their children to get just basic public education. So it's a thing. I would love to see change in that regard. But look, we can move. You served on 21 committees. That's a lot. Did you just told me you did 2, maybe 3 at one time. Was it always that many, Valencia?
They're kind of in different spurts. But sometimes they were simultaneous. So like in the House, I served on 2 other committees besides the 3. Well, kind of 3 I named. And so I was on the Small Business Development Committee, the Economic Development and Tourism Committee, and Interstate Cooperation. So a lot of times during session, all the committees didn't meet at the same time, but education always was meeting. So I went to more education committee meetings than I did the others. But at the same time, outside of the Capitol, I was on the Georgia Council for the Arts. I was a commissioner on there. And so we looked at how to promote arts across the state of Georgia. I didn't have an idea. I was actually appointed to that committee by Governor Deal. And so I got a chance to kind of open up my understanding of the arts and appreciate it more. And I was able to come back and advocate, for the schools and the organizations within my district about improving the arts, because when you go into certain communities, and especially those that are more affluent, you can see the flourishing of art, whether it's in a mural that's on the wall, or if there's actual physical art that they have kind of used from some refurbished equipment or something like that, but you see it. And it just does something different to your thought patterns when you see that. And if kids are growing up in a community, not just the graffiti they see on the walls, but some art that really is a meaningful art. And not saying graffiti is not, I think, in its own place. But just think of how talented those kids had to be just to stand there and do the graffiti. And so whether we have programs that were in our community that can really expound on those, and even when it comes down to poetry, when it comes to writing, all of that, but our kids don't have that exposure.
Awesome, Valencia. You're an awesome woman here. honored to have you here.
Thank you.
I want to ask you this. I'm going to interject this because you've done so much and you're so passionate. I feel the passion right here in this room. And you're a mom. How do you do it all, Valencia? What keeps you going?
Well, prayer is number one, and trying to stay balanced.
Yes.
Fortunate now when I ran for office, when I first ran for office, my daughter was in middle school, and my son was in high school.
Right.
So they didn't require as much attention, but they still required a lot of attention because that middle and high school area.
Tricky.
And yes, a lot of peer pressure,
Yes.
that's going on, with them. And so staying active, at the school so they know, okay, I don't know when my mom going to pop up at the school. And so, trying to stay balanced and then having that passion for service, with the community. So a lot of times I brought my children with me, and so they picked up on, want to do, service as well. And even when they were in elementary school, when I was PTA president and all the other offices that I served on in their younger years of school. And then once, even with my daughter, she was at high school, and then I wanted her to try online schooling. So she attended Georgia Connections Academy online, which is an online charter school. And I loved it, but she didn't love it because she missed her friends. But one thing about it, even during that time, she was able to come down to the Capitol with me because her classes were online. So I had her working as my assistant at the Capitol, giving it good exposure to how the whole process works. And then at the same time, she was actually going to school and making good grades. So those kind of opportunities, whenever you're able to balance it and kind of being able to include your family into what you're doing, then you don't feel as frustrated and you don't feel like you're missing a lot of time out of their growing period. Because it can happen, especially when you have much younger kids.
Yes. Talk to me about why Congress this time. You've been in the House for a couple of years. Why are you running for Congress? Why?
One is that when I look at our leadership in Congress that represent the state of Georgia, there's a deficit.
Okay.
And when there's a deficit, that means that people are not going to get the service that they should have. And I've had the experiences as a business owner for 30 years and a community advocate for 30 years. And I call it the 8-30-30. My 8 years I served as a legislator where I sponsored and co-sponsored over a dozen bills that were actually signed into law. And then mixed with my business experience and community service, then I started having a lot of my constituents and past constituents and friends asking, Valencia, will you please get back in? Because I decided to resign after 2020. And of course I ran for U.S. Senate, which was the last time I was here. And then after that, people kept calling, when are you going to get back in? When are you going to run? Will you please run for this particular position? We need your voice up in Congress. And so, I know that you have to have someone that's bold in this position as congressional district, someone that's solution-driven, who's committed and accessible. And those are the qualities that, the people, my supporters saw in me and asked me, will you please run for this position? So it's been an uphill battle, with the race, but it's in God's hand. I prayed about it because I knew how challenging it was going to be, especially after the Senate race. And so I kept praying about it, and the Lord spoke and said, don't wait, you have to go. You have to go. So that's why I chose the Congressional District 5. Like I said, it's the heartbeat of Georgia. It's a very historic district, being that, of course, former Congressman John Lewis this was a seat that he held previously. And then when I think about all of the work that my dad did with the late Mayor Maynard Jackson, who was the first African-American mayor of the city of Atlanta and of any southern city at that time, and all of the programs he put in place, like the minority compliance department, where if you were a larger company and you did any business within the city of Atlanta limits, you had to have a minority subcontractor on that contract, or you couldn't do business. And they had a compliance department to make sure that you didn't try to maneuver the paperwork and you didn't do what was right. And that allowed our company at that time, my parents had started a promotional printing business, and we were raised in that business. And he got an opportunity to do a bid for the contract at the Georgia Dome when the Georgia Dome was first opened in 1991. And so we held that from 1991 to 2008. So if you came in the Dome and you purchased anything that wasn't food, you, more than likely 100% of the time you came by the stands that we were managing.
Wow.
And so that wouldn't have been an opportunity had Mayor Maynard Jackson had not had that vision to be able to do it. And so why not? Every other small business can have that opportunity. But it takes someone who's going to be bold enough to say, hey, Congress, yeah, we have a minority compliance department, and there's a requirement for federal contracting. But if you don't have someone being a watchdog over those major contractors, then the small business owner can't afford an attorney to compete with a large corporation to dispute, hey, you haven't sent my money, or you're taking out more money than you're supposed to take out. You can't. You have to have someone that's going to be a watchdog over it. And so that's part of the part, you know, when we get into talking about my platform, that's one of the areas is making sure that our small businesses have an opportunity, because they're the ones that are operating in our community. And if they close down, that means there's no goods, no services that you're going to have in your community, and no employment, because most small businesses are the ones that employ the people in the community.
You know, and shouts out to the small businesses that kept going through COVID, through the pandemic. They was able to supply and demand and keep things going. We lost some, but a lot of them were still able to keep going. And so, I think it definitely woke up the country, the nation, to understand how important small businesses are, especially minority-owned small businesses. So that's important. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I go to your website, Valencia, and I see the buck, the book, the ballot. What does that mean?
So previously, I talked about the relationship my dad had with Mayor Maynard Jackson. And that's one of the sayings that he always would say is the buck. He might not have said it in that order, but I changed it. But it was always the 3 B's. And the buck is rejuvenating our economy. That's a focus on small businesses. I think we need to reclassify small businesses to include micro small businesses. Because what happened during the pandemic time, you had the EIDL loans that SBA was distributing out, and you had the PPP loans. And so when they allocate certain amounts of money, they allocate it in categories. So you have money that's allocated to small business category, middle, and maybe large. I don't think the large they gave anything, but for small business. When you think about a small business, it could be 500 employees or less. So if you're a small business that only have 10 or 20 employees, then you was in that same category. So when the money ran out, it was out. It didn't matter whether so many small businesses received it or not. So when you reclassify and add a category that is now micro small business, medium and large size, then when money is allocated, it's allocated in 4 categories instead of 3 categories. And so that's the buck. And also workforce development is very important. Making sure, especially in the healthcare area, we have a large shortage of nurses and doctors, and not just in the metro Atlanta area where Congressional 5 sits, but even across rural Georgia, across Georgia, period. And so making sure, like, for instance, you have APRNs, which are already trained as professional, as registered nurses, that can actually practice in their own field and actually can have an office open up under, of course, the direction of the doctor. But, you know, we need to be able to have policies that allow them to operate, because there's more people that they can be able to care for. But right now, they're limited. So looking at policies like that open up that opportunity for really expanding on health care. That's the book. So the next one is the book. We talked a lot about that, which is Reimagining Education. Our education system is antiquated, and nobody will argue with that point.
No arguments here.
And it needs to be student-centered. Not adult-centered, but student-centered. Because that way that gives an opportunity for every child to receive all the services he or she needs based on, it's almost like the concept of an individual education plan, the IEP, for students who have disability. They actually have a plan that they have to follow by law to make sure that child has a mastery. And so if you kind of think of that same concept where the child is able to move on at their own pace according to the curriculum that's set up just for him or her. And then also apprenticeship programs. It's very important that our students participate and graduate with a trade. if they graduate with the trade, they're able to self-sufficiently take care of themselves upon graduation.
Yes.
And now we have dual enrollment here in the state of Georgia that allows the students to go to college and high school at the same time, no cost to the parents. So whether we expanded that out to make sure that those opportunities are available for the apprenticeship program. And so the last B is dealing with the ballot.
Yes.
It's just voter empowerment, but government accountability. So knowing exactly what's expected of your elected officials is very important, because if you don't know what their roles are and what they're supposed to do, you can't hold them accountable.
Right.
And then when you go to vote, you're not knowing who you're voting for because you don't know whether they did what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And you can't just go by the incumbent or the eye on there if you haven't done any research.
Right.
And so government accountability means senior services, making sure we have support for senior services. One of the things briefly I talk about is that when you think about a senior citizen, they also are people with disabilities. And many of them have mobility issues where they might be in a wheelchair, whether it's electronic or it's manual.
Right.
We have a lot of sidewalks that have cracks in them. And some people might say, oh, that's minor. It's major to someone that's riding in a wheelchair and they hit a crack. They're going to fall out of that chair. And just think if they're by themselves. And they're at the mercy of a good Samaritan who happens to come along to help them back up. But then wherever they were trying to head to, that means they're behind. The crosswalks is another thing. You'll usually have about 20 seconds to get across. There's no way an elderly person or a person with disabilities can get across a high traffic area in 20 seconds. So there needs to be some of those things that are done. They're easy fixes. They're not anything hard. And all the new construction that's going on in our areas need to make sure there's a compliance to making sure if you're going to build a new apartment unit or townhomes or houses, they must be compliant with making sure the sidewalks are easy for those that people that have disabilities, because you don't know if they're going to move in or not, or you don't know if they already live in the area. And so all those things are minor situations, but senior citizen services, veteran services. It's no reason for people who have fought for our freedom, when they come back and they're finished their term tour of duty, that they have to struggle so much with trying to receive services, and even with health care, mental care. And also justice reform, making sure that those individuals have served their time. If they're coming back into society, they're prepared. And sometimes we may have to offer incentives for businesses to be able to hire them. Because if they come out, they can't find any employment, more than likely they're going to end up going back in. Redoing the same crime or a new crime. Because that's all they know is survival. And so being able to look at those types of things. And so, housing is a whole nother, affordable housing. Of course, we talked about health care a little bit. Health care, you should not go bankrupt trying to pay for your health care. It should be a right and not a privilege. You shouldn't say, well, because you have money, you can afford health care, so we're going to give it to you. No, everybody, because if you're not healthy, you can't go to work. If you're not healthy, your children can't go to school because you can't get up to get them prepared. And then if you're not healthy, what's your quality of life looks like? People talking about vacations, you can't go on a vacation because you're sick. So all that is important, non-discriminatory health care. Because sometimes people of color, especially blacks, are treated differently when they go to the doctor than those that are white or other colors. So those are the 3 B's: the buck, the book, and the ballot. Man,
those are some heavy B's. Those are some heavy B's, man. I want to talk about the healthcare shortage. It's unfortunate because we need them, but that job is such a risk, because especially with COVID, they got exposed to so much.
Yes, they did. And
wasn't really honored and respected the way that they needed to be. So I think, for some it's a turnoff, like, I don't want to risk my life, and put in those long hours, and I'm always expected to be at work. So we've got to change that narrative. Either we're going to do something to push things in place to make sure people are healthier, that they don't need to go to the doctor as much, or we're going to make sure that the people that are in the healthcare profession, besides the doctor, is getting taken care of.
And in that, you can always have a supplemental pay. Just like on the state level, when it comes down to our public safety, the state patrol, there was supplemental, and even with the sheriffs, there was always a supplemental amount that sometimes we put into our state budget. Even the teachers at times get supplemental money from the state. So why not have a supplemental on the federal level? We're paying money for all kind of other things,
right.
Instead of some of the things that are very, very essential, like our healthcare workers.
Yeah.
And I think being able to pay them, you know, and especially those ones that are on the lower end of that spectrum of pay scale, I think will help recruit more individuals into healthcare and let them stay there. Many of them are retiring out, and so that's a lot of knowledge just lost. Also, when it comes down to schools, being able to train those individuals into healthcare, making sure that we have the best professionals that are going to be able to train them. And sometimes they end up pulling from those who are retired, but they want to be able to be paid for the knowledge that they have.
I know we didn't talk about it, but it'd be interesting to know what's your viewpoint on this, because you got some great concepts, Valencia, and some great ideas. What are your thoughts about the homelessness that's going on in the metropolitan area? At one time, it was maybe just penetrated in certain pockets in Atlanta, but it is starting to swarm out throughout past the metropolitan area, as far as Union City, some parts of Clayton. You know, any thoughts or suggestions on how you think we could combat that or change that?
Well, I think, you know, there has been several task force, homelessness task force set up.
Okay.
And, you know, you have some people that's what they desire to be, is homeless.
I understand.
And if that's the case, why not have maybe a certain area or place where you could make it look presentable, but and it might have open space just like you would for a park, and then let them, if they want to be outside with nature, you let them be outside with nature. But also provide them maybe, you know, I've seen heard of some portable shower stalls and bathrooms, where they could be able to go in and for hygiene purposes and being able to do that. And then those others that said, look, I became homeless because I lost my job or whatever, then being able to work with them. I think that's where our nonprofits come in. They're set up to be able to help serve the people. But a lot of nonprofits can continue to operate, especially those smaller ones that are not as big as some of the major ones, because they don't have the resources. And then the process of trying to get the resources is like, if you don't know someone on the board, you're not going to get a letter of intent or be invited to be able to apply for the grants. And that shouldn't be, because they're out there serving. If they have a track record, they've been out there serving, then we need to make sure they have the resources that they need. And it's going to take a lot of collaboration on all areas, because it's not just government funding. You have private foundations from corporations that give a lot of money in certain areas they're part of their mission. So, but you wouldn't know that, you know, unless you in the know, or you know somebody that knows somebody else. And it shouldn't be like that. And I think that's kind of the start of us being able to solve that homeless problem. Trying to push them out of an area is not going to do any good. They're going to go and they're going to come back. And then it might be more when they come back. and then if they start going out to other areas that don't have the resources to be able to help them, then they become nuisance. Then they end up getting locked up for loitering and all kind of other stuff. You know, that they're not committing a crime. They just, hey, I don't have anywhere to go. And so I think that it has to be a real conversation, and it has to be solution driven. Let's find a solution and stop putting a bandage over it, because it's very serious when it comes to homeless, because you're talking about food insecurity, it's beyond housing. And now with COVID, so many individuals now end up losing their housing, and now the rent has gone up because of COVID. So now where they could have afforded a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, they can't. So now where am I going to go? I'm going to sleep in my car. You know, and I might can raise enough money to go buy some gas. Then you just think about it. You see a parent in the car with their children. You know, they can't afford to go to the hotel. And then even if they go to some place like Salvation Army, they only can pay for it for so long, their housing. And then so after that, where they go? And if they're trying to apply for a job, guess what? You got to have a residence in order for them to write it down. You can't say, well, I'm living in my car on such a street. They're like, oh no, we're not going to hire you. So you got to have all those things, maybe a mailbox area, you know, that they can be able to receive. And there are some organizations that already do that, you know, so that makes them, give them their dignity back, you know, for them being homeless. But a lot of it is not by choice. It's situations that happen, you know, that cause them to be in. The others say, I want to be out here, leave me alone. If I need something, I'll come see you.
But and you know, getting this job these days, Valencia, they checking credit. You know, not only just if you got a physical address, because sometimes you know, we have P.O. boxes just to kind of make
Right.
sure your mail's in a safe space, blah, blah, blah. They want a physical address. They they run a credit. And I'm like, that's none of your business.
Right.
I'm thinking, that's none of my business. Listen, if I'm struggling, if life throws me an uppercut and I can't and I'm behind, that's none of your business.
Right.
But they're looking at that, well, if you're not good at managing your bills and handling money, we don't want you working for the company. What comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
If I didn't have a job, I'm going to be behind in paying my bills.
And that's why you want a job.
I need this job so I can get back on track. It is not for you to assess what my credit score is. No, especially if it's a job that I don't touch a nickel.
Right.
If I don't touch money, then we ain't got a problem.
Right.
We shouldn't have a problem.
Mhm.
So it's just, I feel that Big Brother is watching is so evasive, you know, invading and checking things that are really not of importance.
Right.
It's really none of your concern. Do I have the skills and the ability to do it? Maybe you can ask me about reliable transportation, maybe. But still, that's none of your business. If I get there every day, on time, and do what I need to do, that's what I need to do.
Yes.
So
exactly.
It's a lot of things. It's a lot of things. I want to talk to you about modernizing the immigration process. What does that mean? Tell me that.
Well, you know, right now immigration is a very hot topic. You know, it's not as a hot topic as COVID-19, but it's hot.
It's hot.
And because, you know, America is the country we call the land of the freedom, of free, and home of the brave.
Home of the brave.
Yes. And so because of that, you have many people that want to come and be residents here in America, whether they come legally or they come illegally. And what we're seeing a lot on the border are a lot of illegals.
Right.
And sometimes they're able to receive asylum. You know, if there's something bad that's happening in their country, they can apply for, you know, put in an application for that. And others just say, I know it's a better place. I'm just going to have to sneak me and my children over here and take whatever chances that we can take. And so we do have a lot of people that are not legal citizens, are not legally able to be here, even if they are they have their papers that allows them to be here and to go to work and all of that. Then others that don't have any paperwork, but they have children that may they brought over here or may have gotten pregnant while the children were here. So there are different levels of dealing with immigration.
Right.
And I believe that being able to modernize it means looking at what the situation is.
Okay.
Our immigration situation is not the same as it was 15 and 20 years ago. And many times the laws that we have on the books are usually 15, 20 or plus years old. Yes, and unless something comes up, that's the only time that those policies are changed. And I saw a lot of it down at the state capitol. And so modernize it means looking at those individuals that have been here a long time and say they just may have had alien status, and find out would you like to become a citizen, and then helping them through that process. Because when they become citizens, guess what? They become taxpayers.
Right. And
so now and then even when they're not citizens, like they're aliens, they're still paying taxes.
Yeah.
So why not allow them, if they want to be able to do that, give them that process to be able to do it. And even for those who are not here legally, if they've been here so long and haven't gotten in any trouble or whatever, for whatever reason it was that they came here, then providing that opportunity as well. Because what happens is, because in America, we provide for a free education. And which means it doesn't matter if you're a citizen here or not. If you have a child in that 0 with a K through 12 spectrum, they're allowed to have free education. And so because of that, you have parents that might not supposed to be here. And you think about a child going to school, and they might it's a chance they come home, they might not see their parents. So those kind of things, and then that weighs on the child. And then for the other part is the DACA, which are those students that are documented here, but they're not citizens. So what has happened in the past is that once they go through K through 12 and they want to go to college, here in the state, they're charged out-of-state tuition. And so, which is usually almost 3 times as much as the tuition. So there's always an argument on both sides. There's some that say, well, they should not, try to sneak in, and they shouldn't get any privileges like what we have here as citizens. And that, we can argue on that side, debate on that side as well. But the point is they're here. And if we're a country that says, we believe in human rights, which, at some points that's not always true. Yeah, so that's a whole nother show for another time, right? But in that case, I think it's, everybody sitting down and having a conversation. Yeah. Those people that are in the immigration processing on the federal level, those organizations that help with processing immigrations and those attorneys, sitting down and saying, hey, how can we make the process a lot easier than what it is, but still having those safeguards in there, because you always have people that are going to take advantage of situations. But at the most part, most of them are not trying to do that. And I met a lot of them as PTA president, and even when I was elected official, I had to deal with some issues with immigration as well.
Foster global stewardship? What is that?
So, of course, we hear a lot that's going on with climate change, and us looking at it differently with our waste products. And I think that when you said global stewardship is knowing that there are other people on this continent and in this world that are not just USA. And so being able to foster global stewardship means that we're able to get along with others and know that there are goods that they produce and there are goods that we produce, and being able to have an easy flow of import-export in all the countries and not just some countries, because right now we just have some, and I think I might have spoke about it last time. Right now the state of Georgia does not have a business office on the whole continent of Africa. Which is the largest continent that has natural resources. And so to not have a business office, now there are companies in Africa that do business with Georgia businesses and vice versa. But the difference is whenever a state has a business office there, that means they have a focus on making sure that they have a easy pass-through or better pass-through for businesses to do business with the state. Instead of them having to go through a lot of red tape, they're saying, okay, we know these are your policies in your country, these are our policies in our country. How do we make it work so it's beneficial economically for you all and it's beneficial economically for us here in the state? So those are those type of small things that I know that needs to be changed and looked into. Now, when you go on the environmental side of it, and that's kind of global as well, I think we can monetize a lot more when it comes down to climate changes and things that we need to do. One example, I was looking at a YouTube video of a scientist in Australia. And this particular scientist in Australia was using plastics, all this thrown away trash, so plastics and rubber tires. And she created a machine that would change those products into ceramic tile that you can use in your home. And so, and it was designer ceramic tile. Right. So just think of here in, even in Congressional District 5, there's one environmental location where people can bring those type of products there and they recycle them. But just think if you expanded it, you talk about job opportunities. And then you're also looking at being able to provide some other products that are renewable and that are not bad for the environment. Another story I read was about a young lady in Kenya, Africa. She was taking the plastics and old rubber tires as well as some other items, and she was creating bricks. And because they have a lot of dirt roads there, so she was creating the bricks to be able to put down on the roads. And also make it for building buildings. Now just think those are biodegradable types of things that were recreated over things instead of putting them into the waste system that we have here. But that's monetized. They can monetize that. Another thing is like our solid waste bill. We see those little blue recycling cans, and some of us use it, some of us don't, and then most of the time we don't use it at the maximum of what it's supposed to be. But just think of if you were able to get a discount off your solid waste bill if you recycle more, and they gave you a big chart of these are all the items that you can recycle. And give you where you can check it off and know what to do when you put it in that blue bin. And then when they come around, it's okay, now you submit in now at the end of the year when your taxes come. And even if you live in an apartment complex, they can still do the same thing and help them with their taxes, which means that should reduce your rent costs that you have. And so those are kind of things that are incentivized that will make people want to do it. because they know they get something in return. Sometimes you can't just tell people, well, our climate and our environment is going to be better. No, they don't. No, I don't see that right now.
Yeah, right. Because you're right. Because I recycle plastic bags and paper bags. And you know why? Because every time I go back to the grocery store, there are the bins there that make it easier for me, even down to the egg cartons, right? So your little foam products, plastic, and paper. It's easy. So that's another thing too, Valencia. If it's easy for me, then I'm going to do it. Right. So make it easier, or make it make sense, or have some stationary places that we could drop those things off. Whether it's our plastic bottles, glass bottles, right? Our bags and such, even paper, the newspaper, confidential things. We're shredding things, and there's nowhere to put this in. But I'm glad to get a straw that said it was made out of a recyclable product. And I think also too, even as a citizen, just a human being, we're going to do more. I pick up garbage in my neighborhood. I had somebody on my show, that's all he did. He was so involved about making sure neighborhoods were clean, that I started to take on that champion in my neighborhood, because the city as a whole is filthy. Every ramp, every exit, every street, anything that has grass, has cups, has things that people had consumed and threw out, because there's just lawlessness about littering. And nobody's picking that stuff up. So now we live in this beautiful place, but you can't really tell because there's so much garbage. And you can't blame the people who live on the street. Their stuff might be in a centralized spot. They're not driving on the interstate, throwing it out on the road. There's tires and debris and stuff from accidents.
And you know that's on certain communities.
It's heavier in more communities, but I'm starting to see it even go. It's definitely going into Atlanta and north of it. When you go to Cobb and some other places, it is cleaner, but you're right, it is in certain communities. And why is that, right? So one, couple of things. We need to take pride of where we live.
That's
first and foremost.
That's right.
I deal with that with my son. Because I'll say, go and pick that up. Well, Mommy, that's not in our house. That's in our neighborhood. And it's a projection of where we live. It makes no sense that our house looks great, but then next door and everything across the street looks like a mess. It brings the property value down.
It does.
Right? So we need to take responsibility on where we throw our garbage. It's not designed to throw it out the car when the car is moving. When the light changes, you just drop it. That's silly. Wherever you end up, there will be a garbage receptacle to take the garbage. So take it with you. So do that. And then two, we need to ask officials or the state or whomever's responsible to get these trucks back out there. There was a time, Valencia, where the incarcerated gentlemen, men that were unfortunately locked up for whatever reasons, you would see them once a week outside picking up the garbage to at least make the highways and the byways and the ramps look nice. And it was, I found that to be a win-win, right? They might have been some people that deserve to be out somewhat. Maybe that's part of the reform, getting them used to having a job or doing something. But it didn't cost me anything. And it was like, you cleaned up the environment. So I don't know what it is. We need these incentives, because if you tell me I'm gonna get something knocked off my monthly waste for you to pick up my garbage, I'm gonna pick up the garbage. I'm gonna pick it up, I'm gonna bag it up, and if you're gonna tell me if I bring in pounds of stuff, I'm gonna not. So tell me how we can get 5, 10, 20 off over here or something. If you're telling me that other countries are learning how to take these things and create other products with it, that's another incentive. Shouts out to the women that are doing it. The women
they're rocking.
doing it. Come on, girls. The women are doing it. So I think we just need to, you're on a great path there. Create incentives so that the common person can win. The common person needs to win, because prices are going up. We coming out of this pandemic, and everything is going up.
We in inflation.
It's crazy.
Yes, it is. So whatever you're able to save, and then participate with, in helping the environment. And then even when you look at your schools, being able to practice the same thing with environmental friendly schools and winning awards, for those. And the students, they want to participate, they want to help. I was 3 years ago, I had started the environmental assessment project. It was a project myself and a couple of other community people participated in, and we went to Forest Park High School and presented it to some students. We had about 20 students that started off with us, and maybe end up about 10. We did it for 10 weeks. We met with them on a weekly basis, and we let them come up with the questions on what they would like to see different in the environment. And so then they went out into the community. They interviewed the community, and then they received all the data back. They put it together, did a presentation we had a community meeting, they did a presentation. They went to city council and did a presentation because some policies needed to change. And then they also received an award from the school system. So 3 years later, after that was over with, we had finished that project, but the students stayed involved. And they now create an Earth Tomorrow club at Forest Park High School. And Wednesday I got a chance to go. One of the students I hadn't seen in 3 years, he was actually one of the students who worked on the forum that was interviewing the candidates. And so I said, "Is that Evan?" Because he looked for me, but of course 3 years he looked different. And he said, "Yes." So we began to talk, and so he invited me to be in one of the other community leaders, and we went to visit, and it was just so heartwarming just to see the garden that they had put together, and almost 20, 30 students that are interested in environment, and you don't find, and there was a mix. It wasn't all one particular color. You had white, you had black, you had Asian, you had Hispanic, all of them working together and believing, and they're working on some other projects. And it was heartwarming to see. You started something that was just an idea, and then you're thinking, okay, we finished with it, but they kept it going, for the additional 3 years. So those are kinds of things that like I said, leadership projects with our students. They want to be involved. They want to be leaders, but we don't give them an opportunity because we baby them and think they're not smart enough to handle it. So, all of that is part of, being a congressional person and being a voice, in Washington, D.C. to be able to say, hey, these are the issues that are going on in District 5. And these are some of the things that I've done on the state level that I know can be magnified on the federal level. And if we need a place to be able to pilot it, then we'll pilot it in Congressional District 5. It's very diverse. You have high earners, you have middle earners, and you have low earners. And so you have to have a leader that understands that there are different levels, and you talk to people on different levels depending on where they fall in that particular category. And when the needs of the higher earners are not the needs as the same as the middle, and same thing as the low earners. But there are some things that are involved that they have in common, which is everyone wants a clean and safe community. They want to be able to have with their children again the best quality of education and those opportunities. They want the best health care that they can be able to obtain. And so those are things that are common. So it doesn't matter if you stay up in Sandy Springs, we having a conversation, you're going to say something about health care. It might not be as intense as the ones in the lower income area, but you still want to be healthy. Because if you're sick, you can't go to work. If you're sick, you can't see about your children. They can't go to school. And if you're sick, you can't enjoy quality of life. You can't go on no vacation. So it doesn't matter if you lower earner or higher earner. Those are issues that affect everybody. Yes.
Excellent, Valencia. Let me ask you the last question here. If given the opportunity to be, to win the seat with Congress for Georgia 5, what are the first 2 or 3 things you'd like to do once you're in that position?
One is, first 2 or 3, I guess it might end up being a combination of it.
You can have a combo. I'll give you a combo.
Yeah, it's forming an advisory council.
Okay.
Because one thing I know that as a leader, you don't know everything, and it's impossible. Even when I was a state representative, I didn't know everything. So I had to lean a lot on those who are experts and people that are actually going through that situation. And so being able to form an advisory council, first with all the elected officials that are in Congressional District 5. What I found so many times was that there's a huge disconnect to the federal government, the state, and the local. Sometimes the local and the state kind of work together, but when it comes to the federal, they usually don't have a good working relationship with their federal elected official. And because the federal is kind of like the big arm or big hand, that all the resources, whether it's funding, whether it's anything else, policies are coming down from the federal government. They're going to impact the state, then they're going to impact the people on the local level, like your city council people, your county commission, your school board. All of those are affected by the guidelines that are set in place on the federal level. And so being able to have that communication set up, and then outside of the elected officials, is there are people in certain type of industries that you want to be able to bring together.
Right.
They have the solutions. I'm solution driven. I want to find the solution. So you have to get to the people who can be able to say, well, I think this will work, but no, that may not work. But yeah, this may work. Yeah. And so being able to listen, and then now I'm able to now take that information back with me to Washington, D.C. and say, okay, what do we already have in place?
Right.
Now, these are the people on the ground that said, this working, that's not working, this is working. And some of the fixes I found are very simple fixes.
Right.
It's just a matter of changing the policy of how something is done. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to redo a bill or introduce a bill. So you have a lot what's called the bureaucrats, that are the individuals that are running these departments. And so they're not elected officials, but they've been in these positions so long, and they've set policies, okay, just like I give you an example, like Medicaid. Our senior citizens have to renew Medicaid and food stamps every year, which it doesn't make any sense to me.
They getting older.
Right.
So why would anything
And so, and now there are some states where they allow the renewal every 3 years.
Okay.
And so why not, there's something, like I said, it's a simple fix. Why not say, okay, in Georgia, we're going to do it every 3 years. And so that way they're able to continue to get their Medicaid or whatever. Now, if you want to call in randomly and say, hey, has anything changed, that's fine. But don't make it dependent on whether they're going to be approved or disapproved because they didn't do the renewal. And then because you're now pushing everything technology-wise to online, how many senior citizens really have activity, you're able to really go on the computer? And then if they don't have somebody in their family, like my dad is 81 years old, so my sister, myself, and all us, we're around, and my children. So they're able to say, okay, Dad, this is how you do this and that. But just think of someone who doesn't have anyone that's coming around. They're messed up, and then if they lose their Medicaid, that's their insurance.
I know.
And then they can't go to the doctor. So those little simple fixes, like that, are things that can be fixed, and it's not a matter of having to introduce a legislation. Now you might need to do it for something else attached to it to make it flow and do better, but some things you can just change right in that department. And so it's just so much, even with the education system, our teachers have to fill out too much paperwork. It's too much. And so because they spend so much time doing paperwork, when it's time for them to execute on what the lessons are, they're so overwhelmed. And then they're dealing with kids with different behavior issues in the classroom. I did some substituting for a little while. So I knew, I said, let me go and see exactly. I was a legislator, so I understood from that side. I understood from the parent side, but I said, let me go see from the teacher side, what was going on. I got a chance to talk to some teachers, even one-on-one while, being in there.
Let me go in here and be a teacher for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to see how much time it takes for the teachers to get control of students, and especially in those areas where they're the lower income areas or where they're the most challenged at. And so they're spending 15 minutes trying to get the students in order just before they can even start curriculum, talking about curriculum. So now you only have a 90 minutes class or maybe a 50-minute class. You spend 15 minutes.
On that.
What happens? Right. And so those students who came to learn end up losing another day. The next day they come back, they lose another day. So look at all those 15 minutes that add up at the end of the week. So we need the support for those teachers. So that's why I say it's a kind of combination of that advisory council. And one other quick one, I know we almost running out of time, is that the Americorps Program, it is a program that's set up to allow college students to volunteer in certain communities. In exchange, they receive a stipend. They also receive money that goes towards their education to pay off a student loan, or if they don't have a loan, they can go towards higher education. And they also have it where they can sometimes get money for health insurance and child care expenses and all of that. So and they're located in some of the schools, but they're not in all the schools. So what are we expanding that particular particular program into all of the schools, especially the ones that need the most help. And they can serve as tutors for those students, one-on-one tutors, classroom assistants for the teachers. You know, sometimes teachers need to go to the restroom, they need a break, but they can't leave their classroom. You know, and so being able to have that extra support, and there might be some paperwork that they can work on. You have teachers that are teaching our students that have a disability. They have so much paperwork to be able to do, and setting up those IEP meetings. So wherever you had students that were trained to be able to help set that up, and I know you have a lot of things that are privacy, you take care of all of that, you know, anyway, when they become employees of the school system. But they'll be managed through our nonprofits. The nonprofits already handle volunteers. They already know how to do it. The schools don't, not the specialists in that. I can tell you that now. And so being able to work with the school system, giving them the resources they need to be able to execute it. And whether we went a step further and open it up to individuals that are not college students, but would like to do something to help back in the classrooms. And then you have that student loan debt. Hey, some of that could go towards paying off the student loan debt. And then who knows among the college students how many of them might end up being interested in education. And a lot of times I found that students don't know about different careers because they're not exposed to it. And kind of what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that is correct. That's an excellent platform. You're going to be a busy woman when you get in there. So tell the people where they can find you.
Yes. So you can go to my website at gostovall.com. That's GOSTOVALL.com. I'm on all the social media platforms at Valencia Stovall. And we need your support. There are only about 9 days that are left in the primary election. Early voting ends on next Friday. And then the actual election for primary is May the 24th. So you can go to my website. If you'd like to make a donation, you can do that as well. You would like to volunteer, maybe be a worker at your own location, at your precinct that you're going to already go and vote at. So we'll just think about this. You go in to vote, come back out, hold up a sign for a couple of hours, you know, or hold up a couple of signs for a couple of hours, then go in to vote. You know, all those things make a difference because we're trying to get the message out. And even if you like me on my Facebook page and Instagram and LinkedIn and all those others, and then share the information. You know, share this show that you're viewing now to others who might say, who is Valencia Stovall? I didn't see her on the commercial. No, I haven't raised money to get on the commercial. Oh, I haven't seen her. She didn't do a mail. It says a lot of things that you're used to seeing that you might not know of until you actually go in and vote and say, oh, it's another person on the ballot. So I'm that other choice that you have on your ballot for Congressional District 5.
Man, I am... Listen, this was awesome.
Yes.
This was a good one because you have some great ideas, some great concepts. You've achieved a lot of great things.
Yes.
It was my honor and pleasure
Thank you.
to
I
have
appreciate
you here today. I wish you all the best. I
Thank
did
you.
early voting already.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm in compliance. I made a donation or two already.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm already in compliance, so my spirit, all hearts and minds are clear here.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
did the right thing. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
It was my honor. So yes, do what my guest said today. Go to gostovall.com, see her platform, see all the things that she believes in, things that she talked about today, her accomplishments. Donate your time, donate your vote. Tell other people to go and vote. The change and the power is in clicking that button, just going in there and selecting the candidates that we want to see represent us and do the right thing and be about change. That is my time for today. You know me, Real Chicks Rock. I am everywhere. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. Go check out my website. It is that time. You know you need them t-shirts in your life. Go to realchicksrock.com, order your t-shirt today. And I want to leave you with this, as I always do, in the honor of my I love this guy, may he rest in peace, Frankie Crocker. We used to listen to him in New York all the time, and he would close out his show every night by saying, may you live to be 100 and I live to be 100 minus a day. So